Well, the first day of the term has come. And so I want to welcome you to Jesus, the Church, and Violence, and start us off with something that is really important for me to share, which are some guidelines for our class discussions, which are going to begin this week, primarily this week through our live interactions with one another on Wednesday during our class time. But these guidelines will also be important for online discussions that we will have. I mean, asynchronous kinds of discussions a little further into the course. Before I get into these guidelines, let me just point out that for our class on Wednesday, there is an assignment that I want you to do before our class meeting time. And that is to post a video to a forum that you'll find on Canvas. And it's a video in which you'll introduce yourself briefly, maybe just in 1 or 2 minutes, but then you'll also respond to a prompt that is written for you there in the forum. And it's a prompt that requires you to have done the reading for this first week. So do take note of that. And then as we move into these guidelines for class discussions, let me just reiterate a couple things that are partly why I'm offering these guidelines. Uh, One of them is that we will be reading some books in this class that are authored or co-authored by sexual predators, two of them being Jean Vanier and John Howard Yoder. And it is dubious, I suppose, judgment of mine to include these authors despite what they have done. But I would like for us to consider how those kinds of hypocrisy are relevant to what we do with books or other things done by the people who committed them. Those two books, one's called Living Gently in a Violent World, which we are to start reading this first week and is co-authored by Vanier, so he's not the only author. The other one is The Politics of Jesus by John Howard Yoder. Both of those books um, do not require that you purchase them. They're available digitally through our library. And so I hope that you'll be able to access them that way, especially if you prefer not to buy them. And then not only with respect to having authors with this level of corruption, uh, moral compromise in their lives, but also with respect to subject matter that is uh, simply difficult to digest sometimes. I want to offer these guidelines for class discussions because people in our class will be coming to these discussions having, in some cases, experienced severe trauma by perpetrators of sexual violence, racial violence. There's the more acute kinds of trauma, but then there's also the more diffuse kinds of trauma that people experiencing systemic oppression will bring to our class. And so our class discussions cannot be oblivious to that. We have to bear that in mind. And so I want that sensibility to be as present as possible, and that's what these guidelines are about. So, looking to what I have on the screen here now, guidelines for class discussions. Number one is that we listen to one another in our discussions, that we listen carefully, and that we listen in light of the social location from which each of us is coming. And by social location, I mean to name things like whether you are white or Black or Latino or Asian American, or from another Asian background that doesn't often get named. Um, these locations affect how we are perceived. And especially if you're coming from a dominant location, say you're like me, a white male who is heterosexual, uh, you've got to be especially cognizant of what your body performs, whether you intend it or not, what your words communicate, whether you intend it or not, in the way that you interact with others. And that requires listening carefully. Um, and with respect to the concerns that some class members might bring to books written by sexual predators, one of the ways that you listen is by not responding in a way that dismisses or in any way minimizes those concerns. But instead, and this brings me to the second one, as you respond, you want to do it in a way that others feel heard rather than dismissed or explained in some way. And that means that we don't want to react initially, especially if we're coming from a place of privilege, defensively, but we want to show that we are hearing the concerns, the experiences, perhaps the pain of other people. And that should keep us, hopefully, from waving away their concerns about reading a book by a sexual predator with some generalization like, well, nobody's perfect or we're all sinners. And so we just have to make the best of it. No, no, that's not going to work. You can't simply dismiss the misgivings or the concerns that someone has like that. Instead, we want to respond in a way that shows that we're wrestling with the pain that they're expressing or the concern that they have. So that's number two. Number three is, especially if you're coming to this class with some experiences of trauma in your life, I want to invite you to seek support from the TAs and or from me, even if you're not sure that you need it. You don't have to wait until it feels like an emergency or you are extremely upset. Hopefully you feel the invitation to approach someone whenever you feel like it might be good to do so, whether the need is super urgent or not urgent yet, but still a need. Please do that. There's a number of TAs whose introductions you will see in the introductions forums. They're from a variety of backgrounds, women and men, people from across the sort of racial, cultural spectrum of backgrounds and whatnot. And I hope that you will um, find that diversity to be welcoming, inviting to you if you prefer to talk with someone about concerns that you have, whether they're about the class or just things that the class has raised for you. We want to be here for you for those kinds of communications. So please don't hesitate if you feel moved to get that kind of support from us. That's exactly why we're here and why we're going to try to work as a team of diverse people that want to respond to the spectrum of concerns and needs and people that are in the class. Number four, if you wish to question or criticize the words of other students, and there is a place for that. This class does not expect that we're all going to agree or react the same way to what we read. But when you're going to question or criticize the words of other students, please question their ideas rather than criticizing them personally. And this this should be expressed not just in the words that you choose, but also the tone that you employ with what you do express. We're looking for clarification, perhaps more expression from others. We're not looking just to um, knock down what they have said. So please be mindful of that. And here, I think I want to say that you want to avoid the tendency that sometimes we have, especially in asynchronous online discussions, to be sarcastic or snarky. Um, you know, I suppose there might be some limited space for that, but be really careful with that sort of thing when the subject is delicate, because so often sarcasm communicates something that we don't intend, and just comes across in a way that uh, hurts the quality of our communication. So I'd be really sparing in your use of sarcasm. The same goes, by the way, for when we're having live discussions and when things get tense or difficult. Sometimes we're moved to say something humorous. I do this as a way of trying to break the tension. Um, or ease the sense of awkwardness that we feel. And you also want to be sparing in that, I think, careful in that, because the quick move to humor when there is tension or awkwardness or pain in the room, so to speak, can have the effect of um, degrading someone who is hurting. So be careful of that. And sometimes we're going to have to sit with some awkward silences and awkward moments, and just try to sit patiently with that, as opposed to um, short circuiting a process because some of us have a hard time just sitting with the discomfort of it and we want to deflect it with some humor. So watch out for that. And then finally, let me just say this: it's infinitely more important to love one another and to grow in our understanding of ourselves through this class than it is to win in some argument or disagreement. So please be mindful of the tendency that some of us have, especially coming from backgrounds like mine, to think that what's at stake in our class is for you to be able to defend your position or to win an argument or disagreement that you have with others in the class. Uh, that kind of winning, I think, is actually a seduction because it keeps us from growing in our communication, our understanding of God's presence in and through one another. And so please keep in mind that the main learning outcome of this class is not for you or me to win some argument. It's to grow in our love for one another. And that's something, by the way, as we'll talk about in class, that's not just a feeling, it's not sentimental, it's a practice. It's how we treat each other concretely. So I hope you'll take these guidelines to heart for our class discussions. I'm looking forward to Wednesday, where we'll begin with some plenary time, all of us together. Uh, I have some kind of introductory remarks that I'd like to give. We'll also have some time for smaller groups in the middle of the 2-hour class session, and then we will close with some more plenary time. And I'm looking forward to not only seeing you on the screen, some of you in my backyard this Wednesday, but also to seeing the introduction videos, I guess, that you'll be posting to the first forum discussion for this week by Wednesday morning. So hope our class gets off to a good start. Looking forward to seeing you on Wednesday.